Otherwise, not a lot of change there.
So you said the property taxes came in lower than budgeted. Is there a reason for that? I mean, obviously there's a reason, but what is the reason for that? Is it people not paying their property taxes, or did we budget incorrectly?
For the most part, it's not receiving anticipated property tax revenue.
Right. Okay. Thanks.
So general fund expenditures then, the largest categories there are your general government and public safety, both individually about 35% of your total expenditures. Not a lot of changes in your expenditures between 2017 and 2018 apart from public safety. There was some increase in police and fire salaries and wages, as well as some additional fire supplies and gear that was purchased during 2018. Looking at your water fund cash and investment balances, in 2018, this was at $507,000. In 2017, it was at $430,000, so this was an increase of $77,000. So you can see that it's getting back up to where it was in 2014 and 2015. And what you can tell by that too is that your fund is covering its operating activities and it's covering its debt payments. So that's good to see.
And is part of that money that we're moving over from the general fund for future projects, or is that all just utility revenue?
This is only enterprise revenue on this slide.
Okay.
So then looking at your water fund revenues and expenses, your overall revenues are continuing to increase, and then expenses are remaining constant. So this is allowing you to get your net position back on track. So net position is different than cash, remember. So there's two parts to your net position in the water fund. There's your net investment in capital assets, and that's the net effect of your capital assets and your debt, and that's at $1,665,000. So that's a good number to be at. But then when you look at your unrestricted net position, so that's everything other than your capital assets and your debt, and that's at a negative $361,000. But if you continue, on this track to, continue to see net income during the year, that should lower that negative net position. So net income for the year was $369,000 before transfers. At your sewer fund cash and investment balances in 2018, you ended, I didn't have that wrote down, but negative cash was $156,000. This was a significant change from 2017. You can see that cash has been negative for several years. Part of 2017 had to do with some timing issues with how utility revenues came in as opposed to when the costs were booked. So that's part of the fluctuation. And then there was also some timing differences in the reimbursement from the Wastewater Commission to cover debt service payments. So in 2018, this fund did cover its operating activities as well as its debt payments, and you can see that it substantially decreased the negative cash that it had in that fund. Looking at the next slide, you can see your sewer fund operating revenues and expenses. Both revenues and expenses continue to increase. That has a lot to do with Forestman Farms now that they were a utility user for the full year. So you can see the positive impact that it had there, and net income came in at $501,000 before transfers. So your liquor fund, gross profit is the top line there, and that has been relatively constant now over the past 4 years. There hasn't been a lot of fluctuation with your net loss over the past few years. From an accrual standpoint, you are at that negative $7,635. When you look at it from a cash basis standpoint, your cash actually went from being a negative $414,000 in 2017 to a negative $441,000 in 2018. So that means that your operating revenues are not covering your operating expenses. Now, my understanding is that the city's made some changes with, the liquor store and hoping to decrease some of those expenses. So hopefully that can turn things around, that we can see that in 2018. So then there's 2 additional compliance type reports that we issue. The first one is the Minnesota Legal Compliance Report, and that's to ensure that you're in accordance with state statutes, and there were no compliance issues noted there. And then there's a report on government auditing standards, and there's 2 pieces to that. There's internal controls and compliance. And as far as internal controls go, we did note 3 material weaknesses. The first 2, the limited segregation of duties and the auditor prepared financial statements, are common for government entities and are difficult to completely go away. These are ones that you guys have seen in the past as well. But limited segregation of duties has to do with the duties held in the cash handling position, that it's difficult to completely segregate things. And then the auditor prepared financial statements is required if we prepare the report. So both of those, these deficiencies are important to, keep in mind throughout the year, because as administration or council, you'll want to be continuously reviewing policies, procedures, making sure controls are in place, and then, more so as council to monitor these items to ensure they're working properly and effectively. And then the material audit adjustments, we did have a few large adjustments that impacted prior year's report, and the first one had to do with the implementation of that GASB 75, the OPEB standard. Now you're seeing OPEB on your statements, and that's just, a new standard that came up, and that was required to be included beginning 12/31/2018. And then the second one was during the audit, we found that there was some revenues being recorded in the water fund that should have been recorded in the sewer fund. So between Sherry and Nick and I, we kind of figured out those amounts and moved them over to the correct fund. And then we did move some expenditures from the general to the TIF fund to more appropriately show a dollar amount for some land held for resale in that fund.
Okay.
And then as far as compliance items go, there were no instances of non-compliance. So professional standards require that certain items be communicated at the completion of the audit. Accounting practices are management's responsibility. We encountered no difficulties. Corrections and adjustments have been made and approved by management. There were no disagreements with management. Management will need to provide us with a management representation letter stating that all essential information has been provided. And then there were no management consultations with other accountants to our knowledge, which would be similar to obtaining a second opinion. And then any discussions with management prior to the audit is not a condition to hire or retain us as your auditors. And then so lastly, I do have some management letter recommendations. But before I go into those, I do want to acknowledge that, there have been management recommendations in the past, and the city has done a very good job handling those and resolving them. Certainly from last year to this year, there's been improvement. So I do want to acknowledge the staff for doing a good job there. So the first one has to do with the municipal liquor store operating loss. So you showed losses in 2017 and 2018. So that means a public hearing will need to be made in 2019 now, before the end of the year. And then as far as the ambulance checking account goes, so the account activity is not booked into the accounting software until the audit. So my recommendation is that accounts be reconciled on a regular basis and that bank reconciliations be done. And this would, detect any outstanding items or deposits in transit more readily if that were to occur. And then there was an issue with the payment of the fire and supplemental fire state aid. So this has to be remitted to the Relief Association within 30 days of receipt by the city. So that happened after the 30 days. And then as far as the credit card policy and approval go, so we recommend that you implement like a separate unique credit card policy, and then you can more easily put controls in place surrounding that process. So you could indicate who is authorized to use it and then the types of purchases that are authorized. I think right now you kind of follow your purchasing policy, correct? And then the sealed bid compliance, so sealed bids were not retained for all purchases above $175,000, and that has to do with the historic City Hall renovation project. The contracted architectural firm did not retain the bids, but this is ultimately the responsibility of the city, so.
They didn't retain the bids.
I think what happened, Heidi Pepper left SCH, and just the transfer of records or what have you did not go well. So,
Interesting.
yeah.
Sorry, we're done with that.
That's okay.
Can we go back to that ambulance checking account
Mhm.
for a second? So the ambulance has its own checking account, obviously. That's
Mhm.
separate from the fire department. The fire department goes through through the city. So, I mean, is the recommendation that we treat the ambulance the same as fire and everything, runs through our payment process on a regular basis? I mean, is that kind of what I'm hearing, or?
That would be the most ideal situation. I mean, if that absolutely cannot happen, then I think, just as long as you have like some sort of monthly process in place to review it.
And is it kept separate now due to convenience, or what's the?
So there's varying stories on that. I can tell you as far as like the ambulance operation goes, Karen Drush handles all of the billing, and that's almost a full-time job between insurance collections, finding the folks that rode in the ambulance, the services provided. I know for expenses out and in, that just makes it much more convenient for them to have that on-site control. Mind you, the ambulance treasurer does come in to get the second signature on checks in real time, so we do have that oversight. We do have access to online statements that we check daily, probably? Yeah. So we could probably implement this a couple different ways. The easiest is simply taking that and doing a monthly reconciliation into Banyan, which will probably be the first step.
So right now you're doing that at audit time, so essentially journalizing all those expenses and revenues.
Right.
Correct.
Okay. That's all my question.
And if you didn't have any other questions, Council, I did want to give a shout out to Sherry Zander, the first audit as the accountant treasurer with us. Baptism by
And you lived to tell
fire.
about it.
Good, bad, ugly. I think we've had new people in that seat every year since Gene retired in 16. So it's been a interesting transition. I think Sherry's done a really nice job, though. Thank you.
Good job, Sherry. So we need a motion to accept the audit as presented, correct?
I'll make a motion.
We have a motion, is there a second?
I'll second the motion.
We have a motion and a second. Any further discussion from the council? All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. Thanks, Kari.
All right, thank you.
Thank you.
All right, item B, consider TIF 1-20 public hearing. So we're,
Hey, Mr. Mayor, can I just 1 second? Hey,
Yeah,
John,
sure.
we're not going to get to the cemetery until the workshop, which follows the meeting. You can stick around if you want, more than welcome, but it's probably going to be a good hour, hour and a half yet. Okay. So as Shannon hobbles up to the podium.
do you want to just sit over,
Yeah.
Shannon, you can sit over there where Kari was sitting if you don't want to stand.
Yeah.
Trying to get back to a normal life, so. And in the past 2 months, I broke a 26-year record of not wearing shorts to a public meeting through this process. So.
Well, I kind of feel honored, actually.
Well, this isn't the first
Oh.
meeting, but it's part of the streak anyway. So, Mayor and members of the council, we're having a public hearing this evening for the purpose of receiving comment regarding the creation of a new tax increment financing district that would be created for the purpose of the Villas project. Patio homes that are proposed for the east side of the community in property that we had previously incorporated in another TIF district that you as the HRA removed earlier this evening. Purpose for creating the tax increment district is to capture new property taxes associated with new development that occurs there for the purpose of using those property taxes to reduce the cost of installing the infrastructure. And so, I think as Nick's mentioned in his community letter, the costs per lot are excessive. They're excessive, we're seeing that statewide for new lot development. We'd like to see this property develop. We've seen a need for a patio home style project within the community. We'd like to see that proceed. The only way that that's likely to be done at a level that's acceptable within the marketplace is to subsidize the lot construction cost. So that's 100% what this is about, is capturing those new property taxes for a period of time and applying those towards debt that's likely to be issued to fund the cost of installing that infrastructure. A tax increment district allows us to capture city, county, and a little bit of school district property tax in order to do that. And so we have sent notification to the county and school district of our intent to do this. They received notice, I think 30 days in advance of the public hearing notice going in the paper. So they've had long lead time to come in and comment if they care to. Generally they don't. But what we're proposing to do is create this new tax increment district, and this enables us to capture the new property taxes for up to 26 years, just so you understand duration. Hopefully, we'll finance and pay off our subsidy associated with this project more quickly than that, but that's the duration that's allowed under statute, just so you understand. This is a housing tax increment district, and income restrictions are applied to the property. Referenced that a couple of times in the letter that I've sent to you. A family of 2 or fewer would have to be below $88,600 in gross household income for us to capture that tax increment. A family of 3 or more would have to be below $101,890 in gross household income in order for us to capture the tax increment from that. What that means is, ultimately they're fairly generous income limits. We expect that a patio home community is going to be made up mostly of seniors. Seniors, while they have lots of assets, tend to be on the downward cycle on income, and are probably by and large going to meet these income restrictions. If they do, we're able to capture those new property taxes and use that to reduce that lot cost by applying those taxes towards the debt. If they do not qualify, it would be our intention to charge full price for the lot and remove it from the tax increment district as required under statute. So, just so you understand, those that don't meet the requirement will pay more for a lot, significantly more. So,
Did we have that income requirement with the other TIF district at Turning?
any housing districts we've had, including Community Asset Foundation, with the Lodge of Howard Lake, that has an income requirement associated with it. Other stuff that we've done has been redevelopment or economic development
Right.
tax increment districts, which don't have an income requirement.
Okay.
What we do within the TIF plan that's been provided for your review is we establish boundaries for the tax increment district, which includes the area of the Villas project, as well as a lot diagonally across from Kitty Corner, I think we call it, across from City Hall, that we're hoping to see some development on. So those are the current boundaries of the district. We also establish a budget for the district, and we in general, my goal is to establish a budget that's relatively large, because at the end of the day, what statute says is we can't exceed that budget. Or if we're intending to exceed that budget, we have to go through this process again to amend the TIF plan. The budget in the document doesn't obligate you to do or spend anything. It doesn't obligate you to build stuff. It doesn't obligate you to subsidize anything, pay a developer anything. It's just a budget for the purpose of complying with statute and establishing a budget and saying, this is what we're going to be beneath with our activities. So we've done that within our TIF plan. It's simply creating the tool that allows us to have discussions with developers to do a patio home project. So, and to capture those new property taxes for a period of time and apply those taxes to the cost of putting the infrastructure in the ground. So, more than happy to answer questions you have with regard to the tax increment plan. There's a resolution that's been provided for consideration following the public hearing that provides for the adoption of the TIF plan. Once it's adopted, copies of the document are distributed to the county and the state auditor and the Department of Revenue. So, again, more than happy to answer questions from the council or public with regard to the proposed action.
So then, those income and other stipulations then just get communicated to any interested developer? Because it's not specific to one developer, right?
It is.
It is specific
okay.
to one developer, and we have had that conversation with them. Ultimately, on day one, when the new property owner enters into a purchase agreement, they need to provide some sort of income verification. Beyond that, it goes away, correct?
Yep, it's only the first occupant
Yeah.
that has to comply in order for us to capture the
Oh,
increment. It's not the same on rental. This is only on owner occupied. On rental, they have to certify annually. On owner occupied housing, it's simply the first occupant that has to comply.
In each patio home?
In each
Yes.
unit.
Yeah,
Yep.
okay. I see. So the first occupant has to apply, and then if they sell it,
Who cares?
it goes with them.
Yep,
Yeah.
we
We've
still
already
have it in our
collected it.
district
Yeah.
and we're capturing the increment and using
Got it.
it to pay for the infrastructure.
So we removed them from the other TIF district because it didn't include infrastructure. Is
We
that
we
part of
removed it from the other TIF district to reset the clock, because the
Oh.
clock starts ticking once we've created a district. That clock has been ticking since, I think, 2013 was when we created the TIF district for the lodge of Howard Lake. And so we wanted to assure ourselves that we're going to have all 26 years if we need them to get our money back.
Right. Okay. Makes sense. Any other questions? Anything to add, Nick?
No, just a reminder, it's, because we always get a little wonky with this. This is just the public hearing
Right.
portion. The action comes further down on the agenda.
Okay. Well, we'll close the public hearing, even though I don't think I officially opened it, but that's okay. And return to the regular council meeting. Thanks, Shannon. All right, item I, department reports, our liquor reboot report. I understand Myra's not with us, but Jason's here, so.
Yes.
Pressure's on.
Flying solo tonight. All right, well, Mr. Mayor, Council, thank you for allowing us a little more time to put this together than what we had anticipated. I think quite beneficial for the city, and I really feel like we've turned a lot of things around in the last 7 months. And, pretty optimistic that we're going to show a profit this year, and a decent one at that. So with that in mind, let's start going ahead and working through this PowerPoint discussion. Basically, the topics we're going to review on tonight are reviewing the budget, kind of what's happening at the store, looking at some inventory and sales analysis, what we've learned. It's actually been about a year since you've contacted me and we got the ball rolling on this. So bits and pieces that we picked up, what we've learned, what we can action, or things that we can take and move forward with and deal with in the future. The joint service agreement with Buffalo, talk a little bit about the construction going on at the store right now, the loyalty program, and kind of things yet to come into the future. So we started with developing a budget for the stores, and budgets are always difficult for me to come up with. I find them very difficult. There's a lot of moving pieces. We've got, not to mention, what are we going to do for sales next year? Is the weather going to impact us? Is it going to be an economic cycle that trends downward, upwards? But we basically base a lot of our figures on historical averages. So this budget was a little bit, the degree of difficulty, as I say here, was a little bit higher. We had some spotty record keeping in the past with regards to the point of sale system, some differences in bookkeeping techniques, and so it was a little bit more difficult for me to look into the crystal ball and get a good idea of how 2019 was going to look. So with that in mind, we came up with this budget. It's actually a profit and loss statement, and I apologize for it being a little bit difficult to read here. But this is through June. I know the big scary number that you're going to see there is that the profit is currently negative $40,000 through June. And I just want to say, take a deep breath. It's halftime right now. We still have another 6 months of the year left to go. And with that being said, what's happened thus far in the year, it was a long winter, as the weather's played a little bit of an impact with us, with being kind of a wet spring too. Construction's hampered a little bit of the revenue capturing capabilities. It's just been difficult to get into the store with some of the parking issues. So if you look at the income here, we're a little less than 50% where we thought we would be at this time last year, or when we put the budget together. So total expenses though, we're above 50% to a certain extent. Some of that has to do with wages. There was some restructuring of the wage policy at the stores, and I'm going to actually address the wages a little bit later on in things that we're going to address later on in the year. A big thing here as we look down on the expenses side and the percentage of the budget that's been used. Some inventory, especially liquor, has already been purchased through the end of the year. There's been some opportunities for us to buy a little bit heavier and realize a better margin going forward. So I've capitalized on that, and I will tell you kind of a little bit more about my buying philosophy and how I purchase here in a few more slides. No, stay there. The loyalty program is another really big question mark that's out there. Right now it's looking like worst case scenario, we could pay out $40-some thousand in the loyalty program. I don't think it's going to quite be there. I'm going to go into a little bit more depth on what that number is going to probably be closer to here in the future. But crunch time, we're looking at, we predicted a budget or a profit of about $25,000. I think we will exceed that. How much is really going to depend on how much more I purchase through the rest of the year. So let's go to the next slide, please. As great as the budget is as a tool for kind of seeing where the borders are and if we're keeping, going forward the right direction, I really look more at I use the new system that we bought for the stores, the point of sale system, to just keep a better idea of what's on hand, what's being sold, how quickly we need to repurchase some things. So if we go by the budget, we've allowed for almost another $300,000 more inventory to be purchased for the year. And then all things, going as planned, that would result in a GP of $25,000. The counterpoint system that we're using to manage the inventory projects that we'll only need to spend about $200,000 between now and New Year's Eve. So we're potentially looking at a savings of nearly $100,000 in inventory purchasing per the budget. So go ahead.
That projected, so obviously you're using the historical data from the system to make some sort of projection, but you're taking into account like seasonality of those sales and purchases too then?
Yep, a few more slides will show you exactly the method of the madness here. So
Pretty cool.
If you look on the right side there, that's a list of the top sellers that we've sold here. So Busch Light cases are your top. You've sold 1,200 of those in the last 6 months. Fireball 100 milliliters, 1,200 of those. The bonus and then the redemption there have to do with the loyalty program. And I'll get into that a little bit more too. But as you can see, we're pretty heavy on the beer. One thing that you should note too, Windsor 175 is there at number 9. That's our top selling spirit. I really backed the truck up on that stuff and bought a lot earlier because we were able to get a greater GP on that, but I'm going to get into that a little more deeply here going forward. So well, these numbers will come up again, and don't disregard that blue line there. I just a typo. So, next slide, please. As I said, budgets are good benchmarks, but they're limited in their effectiveness. The system that we've got, it tracks the sales, it tracks the, it can get kind of overwhelming with how I can, parse up the data and really be able to use it. But my goal is to get a 13-week rotation on all of our inventory items. Works out to about a quarterly system. So the quicker we sell the product, the quicker we, recoup our investment, pocket the profit, and then as my Head and Shoulders bottle says, rinse and repeat. So the next slide here kind of just shows you quickly what our purchasing budget for July looks like as of today. It's broken down into liquor, beer, wine, taxable and non-taxable, miscellaneous stuff. One reason why I'm feeling very confident that these counterpoint numbers are going in the right direction and showing us that we're going to be making or saving, close to that $100,000 is that we are not going to come close to spending the monthly budget that I have created from here. At the far right, you can see that I estimated $67,000 to begin with. We've spent $24,000 thus far. Remaining, we've got $43,000 remaining. I'm not buying any more wine this month. Beer, we might see, us spending another 10 or 15 grand because of the weather. Liquor, we're not going to hit that, the $4,700 that remains in that category too. So, we track this every month, and this will be good historical data for us to use next year in the budget cycles going forward.
And if I could jump in on that too, I know this is hard to read because you don't really need to read it. The part of the point of showing this is the background that we are going through to make sure that we're buying and selling the right products at the right prices. This level of business acumen and infrastructure, to the best of my knowledge, has never been present at that site. Again, I credit Sherry, Jason, Myra. We looked at every reoccurring expense that was within our control, out of our control, and we've done a really good job of putting that together in that P&L statement that you see. So I think the homework behind this is probably more impressive than that outcome number that you see to date, if that kind of makes sense.
I'm going to kind of jump back and forth throughout this with some historical perspective here of where we were and where we are now. Last year, this time, your total inventory in the stores was about $71,000. That's essentially doubled right now. A chunk of that is some things that we pre-purchased. But more importantly, the total SKUs, the total amount of items that we're selling has almost come down 50%. And that means that we're getting more focused on what's selling, what's turning better. There's not as much money that's just literally sitting on the shelf collecting dust anymore. So turn and burn and creating more of these profits. So let's get a little more into the depth of the inventory analysis. This is a snapshot from over the weekend. You start on the left, but you really work sort of right side to left. So you can see liquor, beer, wine, all the categories are there on the left side. The far right side shows the inventory value. As I told you, earlier, I bought up heavy on Windsor. It's our number 9. It's in our top 10 selling items. There's quite a that in the basement right now, so that explains a good portion of that $80,000. Beer is right where it should be at about $30,000. Wine's a little high, and I'll get into that in a little bit too. And then the miscellaneous items, we've got about $4,000 there, and tobacco, corkscrews, can koozies, paraphernalia. Next slide is kind of going to put some more meat on the bones here. This is the turns that we're realizing right now. So right now, if you look on the far side, beer is turning at 13 times per year. So we are selling beer, and I'm going to get into this a little more too. The beer is essentially sold before you purchase it. So we want to keep that going as much as possible. That's great for our cash flow. That's, even though it's a low margin product, the more we can turn that stuff, the quicker we can sell it, the more money we're going to put in the bank. Liquor, you can see there, 2.1 turns. That's a little low. The next column over shows weeks on hand. At the current rate, and this is looking back January 1st through when I ran the report, which was on the 14th. it took into consideration everything, and it says, right now, we project you've got 30 weeks of inventory on hand with the liquor. Not worried about that. We're at halfway point right now. We're going to be looking at, some increases in the sales going through the rest of the year. Historically, the back end of the year is a little bit more than 50% of the sales. And then wine is another thing I'm going to have to work a little bit more on. We're at 38 weeks right now. Again, not terrible, but we need to address that going forward. And the turns with the miscellaneous stuff, it's 6 and 7. In other words, they're turning about every 2 months or so. I think those are probably right where they should be. And considering it's a fairly low inventory amount there too. So as I kind of already got into this, beer is our cash cow. It's about 60% of our revenue comes from beer. It's right now turning on 28 days. So yeah, we're doing just fine on beer. I think a lot of that has to do with, and a lot of the SKUs that we reduced have to do with the cooler reset, the first thing that I really did when we went into the stores. I wanted to address the biggest movers and the biggest moving products, and that we had to redo the beer coolers and just make sure that we were looking through there, taking the products out that weren't selling, adding products that were selling or trending upward, and trying to capture, the ever-changing consumer demand. There are 20.
When you say, and I need to dumb this down for my own self, but when you say year-to-date turns in 28 days, so basically you're saying if you buy whatever beer you buy on July 1st, by July 29th, on average, you've sold that
The
quantity.
value of the inventory has been sold through, not necessarily the product,
Right.
but
right.
the value has we've completely cycled through it. So if we get 30 days to pay for beer. That's the one difference between privates and municipals. Private people have to pay COD for beer. We get 30 days. So when that bill comes in from Dahlheimer for the Coors that we buy, we've already sold it
Before we paid.
before we even have to pay for it. So it's a good place to be. There's 24 weeks left in 2019. The beer, obviously, we're cranking through that just fine. Liquor, there's 27 weeks, and there's 38 weeks of wine. There's, next slide, please. So with that being said, I think we're in a good position because, there's 27 weeks of product there with liquor. There's 24 weeks of sales. One example would be to look at the Windsor deal that I did. We've got over 30 weeks on hand right now, but I've been able to lower the price and maintain the margin, actually exceed the margin a little bit where we want to be with that product. But you can see we did the purchase in May. So the numbers down here, that 52 is January. That's 52 bottles sold, 49 bottles in February, 38 March, April, it was 55, and then in May, when we lowered the price, we went up to 72.
Wow.
May is not a whiskey month. So,
I mean, for some people, every month is whiskey.
hey, don't have to drink champagne on special occasions either. So, but there you see there too, we're at 61 for last month, again in a hot month, 33 months to date. So we're on par to go to 30,
Right.
70 or, into the future here. And we've got 5 more months with, and then we're getting into whiskey drinking and, weather with the turning a little bit colder.
So when you're making that a price adjustment and we see that big jump in May are there marketing costs that are associated with that, or are we just?
I got a free banner out of it.
Oh,
Is the
Free?
banner still up?
It's on the building.
okay. I was just curious if there,
Broke my banner.
if it's just, somebody comes in, early in the month and they realize that it's cheaper and then they come back and buy more, if we're like doing something to promote it but
The marketing is one of the things that we're continually looking at. Myra loves social media, but you can do that very well or very poorly. So it's something that we're continually learning,
Right.
Continually changing. Believe it or not, I've actually heard comments on that banner that is outside the building, which kind of hurts a little bit because I don't like banners, but word is getting out that we have cheap Windsor, which is a good thing.
inexpensive.
Yeah, yeah, thank you.
Not cheap.
So, like I said, I approached Nick with this thing. I said, golly, we got a great opportunity to buy some Windsor here and make some money, but I need you to kind of open the checkbook here a little bit. And but it's things like that we do. Windsor's an example, Captain Morgan's an example, Sky is an example. These big national brands require you to really kind of invest in them and buy the 25K steels or multiples thereof, which happened in May with Windsor, with it being, getting the price down. I think $6 a bottle is what it came down, vis-a-vis where it was the last time we bought it. So, and I figure, as long as I can, return the money with interest back to the city before the end of the year, that's what this whole thing is all about,
Well, and if you know sort of even conservatively where you are going to be with sales, then really the purchase of it is just a timing thing.
Right.
You're either going to purchase it in March or you're going to purchase it again in August. You know what I mean? You're going
Right.
to purchase smaller amounts in more frequent months.
And that's why I put a lot of faith in this system that we've got to give me accurate data to be able to make these decisions.
Right.
So I think we're going to be darn close to 2 cases left by the time we get to the end of the year. So hopefully we won't run out by New Year's Eve, but if we do, we do. Sales analysis, the next slide here. Kind of an overview of what's selling again. I look at this on a regular basis. You've already seen this, as I said, but what are the top sellers? What are the areas of opportunity? Do we need to have more small sizes? Fireball 100, that's a smaller bottle. Those are becoming more popular. I'm looking at this thinking, I don't see any wine in this here. I know that at the other stores in Buffalo, the seltzers are big. Those are a big new product. I don't see any of that here either. But on the other hand, I think, hey, let's bloom where we're planted and make some hay here in Howard Lake. Why did I just say Buffalo?
That's okay.
Sorry.
So can you go back to that for a second?
Sure.
So that profit percentage column, is that the profit margin of that product? Or is that the percentage of total profit that Busch Light sales represents?
That is what we have earned thus far.
Okay.
So right now we're running a 21.3% profit margin on it. And it has, if you go to the right a little bit further, it's year to date, we've earned $4,800 in profit on that particular item. So, and the bottom is an average, so you're at 20.2 there. So these 25 items, there are 10,783 items have been sold at a profit of 20.2%, and the gross profit amount is 21,000. I apologize with it being hard to read, but
I don't know how many.
So essentially the Busch Light makes up a quarter of that 21,000.
Yeah. It's a beer town.
That is
So.
crazy.
The next category is going to kind of get a little bit further into what you're looking at. This is year-to-date sales. As I said, we're 60% beer, 29% liquor, 7 wine, and 4 miscellaneous. The next column over here is list the categories here. Disregard the ranks, but the sales, year-to-date sales on beer is $250,000, and we've made $61,000 in profit on that at a 25.3% profit margin. So, working our way down, you can see where liquor's at. Liquor's a little more profitable. The loyalty program, that takes a hit there, but we'll discuss that here in a few more minutes. And then miscellaneous, non-tax, open liquor is kind of don't worry about that. It's kind of a correctional account. And wine brings up the rear, number one in my heart, but bottom of the list. So, next slide, please. So, what we've learned so far, I think, is that the construction is definitely affecting the sales, but we were kind of prepared for that. We knew that this was probably going to be a reality. On the right side, you can kind of see some of the effects. Customer counts year to date, 18, just over 18,006. We just cleared 18,000 for 2019, so it's not that bad. We're down about 4.3% in total sales thus far. I didn't give you profit numbers just because they're kind of well, if I went back to I don't know 2018's profit numbers offhand, year through the first half of the year. But, right now we're sitting at 26.4%. I don't know, Nick, do you remember offhand?
Don't.
So,
That 600 customer count is probably just people that bought all their Windsor at one time in May, by the sounds of it. There's one customer.
well, they
come
lost
in and
out.
buy 4 bottles.
They lost out on a deeper deal, so.
Yeah.
We'll take that money, though. The loyalty program, we are almost to 1,000 participants. We're a little bit unclear on the impact of this program because we don't have we've got some customer counts, but we haven't been able to kind of, overlay those with the program and everything else too. So there needs to be some more data mining that goes on there. But what Myra can tell you is that there's a lot of new people on that list that she doesn't recognize the name of. And, with her history in town here, she's got a pretty good idea of who's a local and who isn't. So, and who's a new customer coming into to the store. So, year to date, 254,000 points have been earned. Now, to earn a point, you spend $1, and the program is sent so that after you earn 200 points, you get a $10 credit or back. So it works out to a 5% rebate on your purchases. So with the 250,000 points being earned, 147,000 or 58% of those points have already been redeemed. We need to keep an eye on that going forward because we don't know what that annual redemption rate is going to be, and that's going to be key to budgeting how this, is going to work out next year. And ultimately, we need to decide if it's worth, if the juice is worth the squeeze here. We exceeded $22,000 in discounts last year. Year to date now we're at about 6,000, 7,000. So we're running pretty good. I think we're going to be underneath last year's figure. But if everybody comes in December and starts redeeming all those points, that's where we could see that possibility of a $40,000 expense. And at that point in time, I don't know if it's worth, keeping a loyalty program around. But those are some things that we need to kind of, review at a later date when we've got a little bit more data to go off of.
Do we have an expiration date on those points?
You're not allowed to. So the other thing was everything's working well with Buffalo. We're working well together. The concept has proven itself. I'm saving significantly in labor in Buffalo. I think I'm doing okay with you guys. Trying to make sure everybody's happy over here, and but we are going to have to tweak the relationship a little bit and kind of figure out some changes to the labor hour allocations through the rest of the year. So, next slide, please. I've learned that there are some things that are within our control and are not in our control as far as what we would be able to take from what we've learned and move forward. So. I wanted to look at the liquor profits here because size really matters when it comes to these liquor sales. Those small bottles are just a gold mine, and we get them for free a lot of the time. So, I did put a lot of emphasis into expanding the merchandising area for the small bottles in the stores, and that's, I think, proven to be money well spent. As we talked about earlier, those Fireball 100 mils are the top, the number 2 item that we're selling. The profit margin's huge on them. If you could go up further to the right there, Nick.
that I could.
Okay. Well, that second line down is the 100 mils, and the Fireball is going to be included in that. So they're running at a 47% profit margin. The 50 mils, the little airline bottles, are running right now at a 54% margin on those things. So, there's a lot of money to be made at 99 cents and $1.99 and 2 for $4.99, 3 for $4.99 out there. So customers love them. I'll keep selling them. We've got plenty available in the basement. So, we'll, I'm looking to really, cash in on that as the year progresses.
So which of these are those little bottles that you're talking about?
The second one down, the liquor, 100 mil liquor.
Okay.
So we sold $2,400. The cost of the sales, or the profit there, is $1,161. I didn't give you the quantity of them, but it's significant how much we sell. So, you know, absent in there is wine. You know, ironically, our middle name is wine, but it's not even breaking into the top 30 categories. Woodbridge Chardonnay was our #1 seller last year, it continues to be this year, but that's only the 43rd most popular item we have. I had to go all the way to number 108 on the list to get to Apothic Red, which is the #1 wine we sell in Buffalo. So, one thing to note is that the year-to-date profit on wine is $8,900. Vodka down there is $8,600 in profit. So one category, vodka, we're making almost as much money as we are on all the wine that's being sold.
But you're selling less wine and making a better profit, right?
We are, yeah, but I'd like to see that, like to see us grow a little bit more in that category, see if there's an opportunity to.
The wine
With
or
the,
vodka?
with the wine, you know, with the new store coming up and the new, you know, expanded merchandising opportunities, you know. You know, we haven't historically been known as a wine town, maybe we can, you know, claw back some of that market share that we're losing.
I mean, Howard Lake, Busch Light, and Windsor just doesn't have the same ring to it as Howard Lake Wine and Spirits, so.
Hey, if
We'll
it's-
consider it though, maybe that was naming
maybe
rights.
next year.
And one thing, again, to Jason's credit, I think as we purged inventory, kind of at the beginning of this, a lot of effort was spent on that wine. We got rid of so much wine that just was not moving. I think if you were to look at that graph for wine is probably already kind of tweaking back up on a good trend just because we have the right wine. I think we
Exactly, it was.
There was a point where we didn't have some of like Buffalo's top 10 wines, and those are now in our store and selling pretty good. Most liquor stores sell bulk kind of cheap wine in boxes that you pick up on your way in or out.
Yeah,
We didn't have room to do that.
I'm surprised that, you know, the top wines are the smaller bottles. I mean, the normal size bottles are not boxes or the magnums that, you know, but you sell more of those. So, I don't know. I mean, it's we'll see if we can turn that around. So, next slide, please. So, what I can't control as far as making, you know, improvements going forward, the seasonal nature of the sales, we're losing campers here in a few weeks, and that seriously affects the profitability of the store. And if I spent a lot of time last few weeks looking at trying to get what your break even is, because we were just kind of guessing, you know, as far as whether or not Sundays and different hours of the day were profitable or not. I'm guessing it's about $190 an hour that we need to sell at basically a 25% margin. And my spoiler alert, we probably should start, or Howard Lakers should probably start thinking about buying on Saturday, unfortunately, or start supporting Sundays more. So, okay, lots of numbers, confusing, but the top group of numbers, that's data from April of this year, before campers. And then the bottom set of numbers is June, when we're in peak season here. Everything in red is we are not making money in that hour, okay?
Interesting.
So the hours are listed on the left side. The next column over are Sundays. Now, the second column, Monday, Wednesday, Thursday, Saturday, those are groups of 3 days. So if you see a red number and it's $200 and you're thinking that's over $190, no, we earn $204 that hour over 3 days. So everything, so on the Monday, Wednesday, Thursday, Saturdays, you're gonna need to earn at least, almost $600 an hour to break even. So the bolded ones where it says total June, that's the total weeks. And if you look at the bottom down there, the sales per hour for week 1 in June worked out to $230. So we made money every single hour that we were open that week versus.
Say that again for me? I didn't quite follow.
Okay, so this number here, that 230,
Oh, there it is.
I
Okay,
took-
I see it now.
that means that aggregate, we made enough money to cover the slow hours
Got
that
it.
whole week. If you look up there at April, there's a lot of red.
Right.
There wasn't one Sunday that you made money there. So there's also the outlier hours too. You know, the first hours of the day, the last hours of, the last hours of the day as well. Obviously, things slow down.
Sure.
So we're going to be looking very critically at this going forward so that we have got a good game plan in place for the fall and winter coming up here. So any questions about?
Can you go back to that just for 1 second, Nick, please? Thank you.
What's really telling, I think, there for the slower period is that there's really no reason to be open before noon most days, which is unfortunate. And we tried that earlier this year, but we just kind of felt like we were getting people grabbing on the doors. But it's, it's so psychological. We want to help
Right.
people and sell things. But if we're going 3 days in a row, just to the top left there, and you've made $84 between 10 and 11 o'clock on Monday, Tuesday, and Wednesday.
Right.
You didn't even make 20 bucks an hour in sales.
Right.
So we've got to be realistic about aligning our expenses with our revenue capturing capabilities.
This is really interesting.
So,
Was this possible with our old software? Had to throw that softball out. Thank you.
yeah, thank you.
answer.
Thank you.
This is interesting.
Yeah.
So,
What would be really interesting is if you took out, let's say you just eliminated that, I'm just looking at June right now, but if you eliminated Sunday altogether in the first, 3 hours of the day, then what does that 230 change to? That is what would be really telling.
yeah, that's why it was kind of difficult. Figuring out that per hour
Yeah.
cost, and then I did run some trials, so to speak, where I took Sundays out and then it didn't open before 11 and then closed every night at 8, with the exception of Fridays and Saturdays. I think I took the 10 o'clock, the 9 to 10 hour, I think I took out completely, and I shaved off 2 hours in the mornings, and it didn't really affect the numbers that much because it's still so slow,
Right.
So, but, on the other hand, it's retail, and
Right.
I've been down this road in Buffalo too, and we're still providing a service. So,
Sure.
you can't expect it to be the most efficient. You can try, but you can't expect it to be, completely efficient 100% of the hours of the days that
Right.
we're open, so.
Well, at some point you have to accept the fact that some of the hours you're open, you're just not gonna have sales.
Exactly, that's
the
what
way it
that's what I'm
goes.
saying.
Yeah.
Mhm. And then, you just make sure you got a lot more of these $1,600, $1,800 hours to offset them.
Right.
So, but the odds of that happening in slow season is just, it's just not there. So, next, still to come, I don't really have much information about the rest of the project. That's sort of your wheelhouse. The store reset, we've got the shelves, we've got product, we just need a floor. I can't control the floor guys.
Doesn't seem like much to ask, does it?
So, and the wall to come down, so, that's really left, all that's left to kind of talk about tonight. Just leaving with the final thoughts of, the odds are good that we are going to show profit. This is significant compared to last year. Remind you that remodels tend to help liquor stores. I've never heard of a liquor store that's been remodeled that didn't do better than what they did before. So the future is looking rosy on multiple different levels, and it's not Pollyannish. I think that I've tried to prove with the data here that, things are going in the right direction, and it's all ahead full for the rest of the year. So,
Is it safe to, it's a poor assumption, but year-to-date being $40,639 at a loss so far, because that inventory was bought so far in advance, and there's $80,000 of whiskey downstairs, and there's another whatever in vodka, that number means nothing to me when I look at that $40,000, and because we're
It really
potentially not
shouldn't.
going to purchase any more whiskey.
it shouldn't mean anything anyway. It's
Well, for me, because we haven't had a financial report, we haven't had anything from the liquor store, not knowing, and it kind of catches you off guard because
Sure.
we're doing what we feel is the right thing for the community and City Hall's restoration. That, to me, that's a face of Howard Lake, one of a few, but not knowing this, just, we feel like I feel like I made the right decision, but on the flip side of that is, if the liquor store is struggling, which it's done in the past, it's at a loss in 17 and 18, you know, it's nice to know that month to month and where we stand. And I just feel that I wish I would have seen this information sooner.
Yeah, I can address that. I think ultimately I'll take responsibility for not having quality, timely reports. That's something that you'll see hopefully monthly moving on from here. We spent a tremendous amount of time on the profit and loss statement, the way that it's structured, the numbers, the assumptions that were used. And to the point where we probably could have shared something, but it changed and fluctuated greatly to the point where it would have possibly done more harm than good. But I hear what you're saying, and I take
Yeah, I
that
mean,
responsibility.
to see a loss in January of $500 and a loss in June of $3,700, that leaves like $9,000 a month in loss that
Yep.
I can't visualize.
Right.
Just be nice to be able to see
The
it.
single biggest factor on that, again, and I think Jason's done a wonderful job of showing how we're now able to show the inventory that we have on hand, show that it will sell, and when it will sell, at how much. We've never had that acumen before. So where we always kind of held the thumb on Myra in the past saying, don't do large purchases, we've really flipped the script on that quite intentionally. Similar with the inventory levels on hand. I don't know where it came from, if it was in a report or a best practice somewhere, but we try to keep it within 10% of gross sales. So if we were anticipating $700,000 in sales for the year, we wouldn't go above $70,000 in inventory. Meanwhile, we were paying more for product than we ever needed to if we were buying in bulk product. So right now, July of 2018, we had $70,000 in inventory that we weren't making money on. We have 130, which was an astounding figure even when we pieced it together at our level. But that's money that is also impacting that $40,000.
Well, but the difference really is, and we've all said it already, is that now we have the data to justify the purchase. Before we didn't have that.
We had nothing.
We had nothing. So, like as a council, it's hard to say, yeah, go ahead and buy 50 cases of Windsor when you can't guarantee me that you're going to sell them in 12 months.
Yeah.
Now, we sort of know that. I mean, that's exaggeration.
I wish there was a way outside of the loyalty program or the rewards program that you'd be able to capture that. I mean, other than Myra saying, well, I recognize that face, that's a local, to be able to capture the people that are coming in or just people that are driving through town. Because, you know, I work in Winsted, and sometimes I go, well, is it more convenient for me to stop in Winsted, or, you know, or am I going to buy in my hometown, you know? And I'm of the mindset where, like, Joe's here in town. I'll spend the extra percentage to get something here for convenience. So if somebody's buying Busch Light at Target for $14.99, but I live in Howard Lake, I don't have a problem buying a case for $16.50 instead of $14.99. You know.
Sure, and perhaps is your credit card capability like what I have, where I could,
Yeah.
you can dive into that? We could show you a report that basically it provides a map, and it provides the home zip code of every person that's used a credit card at Howard Lake Wine and Spirits. So I can do that with Buffalo, and I can see that there's a obviously there's a hot spot, it's red around Buffalo, but then I've got, a few people in Monticello and a couple people in Howard Lake and a couple people in Winsted. You can see where your customers are coming from in that respect. So we might be able to do something there. We're capturing email information from customers too, that we're keeping it completely private and with us. But the goal is to eventually use this Counterpoint system as a marketing tool as well. And we say, hey, we can see that you're a Coors Light fan. We're going to put that on sale for a couple weeks, and we're going to send you an email about it. So, I mean, that's down the road a little bit, but that's one of the things that we could work on in the future as far as really diving into that loyalty program and getting it
Have
to
those
work for us.
beer sales always been historically the leaders, like the Busch Light and the Mick Golden were on there for one of the, two of the strongest items that were in there, but Mick Golden was like 30% and Busch Light was like 22%. Have they always been?
Yes.
Or is it because of a price drop that took place that caused a surge?
The margins that you see on on the reports here. One of the reasons why it took a little while to get good numbers to you guys is because we had really bad numbers at the beginning, and somehow something got transferred in, and our margin on we got done with January, and I looked at the beer margin, and you guys were making like 65% margin on your beer. Well, I found that there was an error in one of the costs that got transferred over when we transferred the inventory from the old system to the new system. Well, that made everything wonky, so we had to kind of let some time pass, because you can't really go in and fix the past, very easily on these systems. They're not designed to have people to go in and pick and choose and do some creative accounting with it. We had to let it kind of cycle through, and then it's showing a much more accurate profit figure now, 6 months into it, than we could have shown you, earlier. But to your point, the big brands of beer, we're always making 20%-ish on, so they're, I'm not gonna say they're loss leaders, we make what we make on them, but, and we're happy with the profit. But, I've always priced things to be fair every day, and I don't like pulsing things. You can go down the street and buy beer for a nickel over cost or whatever it is for a few weeks, and then you're gonna be paying an extra $6 a case because they've got to make that up in the long run, so.
And one other thing, Jason, to your earlier point, I think our business model completely changed with this setup too, where a year ago we were trying to be too many things and really not succeeding in any of them. With the inventory that we have on hand now, it's really much more to the convenience format to sell the products that we know we're going to sell to our community. We're not a destination liquor store, and we're not pretending to be. We're not a boutique store, and we're not pretending to be. The products that we see in this store are bought by Howard Lake folks. We want other people to come in, don't get me wrong. We want to be welcoming and receptive and so forth, but we know what our locals want, and we're selling those products at a good price.
Further questions?
I said, go ahead.
No, we don't.
You said something earlier in the presentation about talking about wages. Was that the part where you were talking about the hours? Was that what you meant?
Yeah, coming back to that, there's been a little bit of restructuring as far as increasing wages with the staff. That happened as well, so that's probably going to account for a couple points there in that 52. I think it's 52% above. I kind of looked at what's at 50 and what's over and below. So that's probably why it's skewed a couple points high there. We added hours on Sundays for a while, just trying to see if those were helping. If we were losing sales, we didn't know because we didn't have the data to make any decisions off of. So, but yeah, the two main expenses that I'm going to be seriously looking at controlling are the wages and then that loyalty program.
And controlling wages through hours, basically.
Right.
Is really your only way.
Yeah, I mean, I'd love to be open as many hours as possible, but it's nonsensical.
Yeah.
So,
Well, and the tough part too with Sundays is obviously you don't know. If you close on Sundays, now if you've missed those sales, are those people going to come back on Monday, or are they just going to go somewhere else on Sunday? I mean, obviously there's no way you can know that unless you ask, all 12 of them that came in.
You'll hear about it on social media.
That
pretty
is
quick, though.
probably
Sure,
true.
very, very fast from three
Yeah.
people.
but, for many years, we didn't have Sunday sales. And we just recouped, we had 6 days of expenses and we had 6 days of revenue, so if we can get that back closer
Yeah.
in line, I think that some of what's sold, and a lot of other towns that I've heard of in Minnesota have been through this, they didn't see any increase with Sunday sales. They just saw Saturday nights not being as busy and Monday
Right.
mornings
The
not being
sales
as busy.
shifted, yeah.
So when I was running some of my, scenarios with hours, I was taking those Sunday sales and putting them back in, I just threw them back into Mondays and Tuesdays, I think. I wish I would have kept that because it was kind of interesting, but I could show you again some other time. But I kept all those sales but put them back into the week because I don't think you really lose those sales on Sundays. I think if you really scoured it here, it's just, you've just diluted the hourly, revenue.
Right.
So.
Right. And I mean, I guess, there's two worst case scenarios. If you lose the sales altogether, you're closed, so you don't have the expense anyway, and you already weren't covering your expense. So in that respect, you're coming out ahead.
Mm-hmm.
But I guess the other side of that would be is those people who were coming in on Sunday are also coming in on Tuesday and Wednesday. and now they're not doing that because, but then again, you're never gonna know that. I mean, Myra could probably ask him, and she probably would, but. Well, good, this was very comprehensive, thank you. It's
Very good.
It's good to see that that system is doing what we,
Yeah.
or you and Myra and the system are doing what we hoped it would do, so.
I think it's paid for itself.
Yeah. I would
Pretty
agree.
close.
Jason, you're doing great. Myra is doing tremendous. There's a huge learning curve with her, and she's keeping up. She's an asset in Buffalo. My disclaimer that I gave at the beginning of this is we don't know if this is going to work, but it's pretty much our best and last shot. I haven't lost faith yet, I guess, so it's exciting to see where this is going.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah. Thanks.
Thank you.
We don't need to do anything with that, we basically accepted it all. Okay, all right, new business, thanks, Jason.
Thank you.
Item A, consider declaring Chevy crane truck a surplus.
Thank you, Mayor and Council. So this item is kind of following a series of items we've had over the last year, 2 years of looking at our equipment. Are we using it? What's its condition? Should we keep it? In that vein, we looked at our Chevy crane truck. So this is a 1997 truck that we've used largely as an extra public works vehicle. When we've had seasonal staff, we've needed an extra vehicle that they've used. Occasionally, we've used it also to pull pumps and lift stations. That's the primary purpose, I believe, when it was purchased. But it's really an infrequent use that it's ever used to pull pumps. The majority of the time, anytime there's an issue at a lift station that has to do with the pumps, it's largely electrical, and we refer to Nelson Electric, who does all of our pump repair and maintenance. So we rarely ever pull a pump. Nelson Electric has their own crane truck, but we've kept this because we needed an extra vehicle at times, and we already had it, so we might as well keep it. But due to its significant age, it continues to break down, and now, especially since we do now have 4 public works trucks now that we just got our newest one, we just don't need it.
Okay.
Staff aren't using it, so it's really it's well beyond its useful life. It's been a great truck for us, but it's just no longer needed. So
And we all know we don't have the storage space.
Exactly. So we want to clear out room in our public works garage. We're not totally sure what this is worth. It's in rough shape, but maybe some of the components on the crane truck would be usable by someone else. So we plan to post it on the state auction site to see the best price that
Right.
we can get for it. So we're asking that you declare it surplus and authorize us to post it on the state bid site.
Seems like a no-brainer.
Yeah.
All right, we'll entertain a motion, I think.
I'll make the motion.
We have a motion, is there a second?
I'll second.
We have a motion and a second. Any further discussion from the council? All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? The motion carries. Item B, consider contract for generator maintenance.
Thank you. So this is kind of switching gears again, talking about our lift stations, but this item is more about the backup power for all of our lift stations. So we have 5 generators. A few are permanent, built into the water plant, the former wastewater plant, which powers the lift station, and the lift stations that's out of the school, as well as we have 2 portable ones that anytime there's a power outage, those get moved to various lift stations around town to make sure those are still being powered. So that's the purpose of those generators, is just to make sure we don't have sewer backups. And a couple times a year, staff turns them on, checks them, changes their oil, but that's about it. That's about all the generator maintenance that we do. There's been some concerns, as Troy's been working on lift stations, with the generators not turning on when we need them to, and just knowing that there's this much of the maintenance that we do, but this much of the equipment in the generator itself, that he really recommended, we need to have somebody who does work on generators look at these once a year to make recommendations on this probably needs to be fixed, we need to change this more frequently, to make sure that in the event of emergency or a power outage that our lift stations stay powered. So this would take care of all those 5 generators like I mentioned. We propose signing the 3-year agreement because you get a better price, and then it makes sure that for those 3 years, maintenance is always happening on those generators. At the same time, you know, it's really, I think, a minimal expense for the value that we have in preventing sewer backups in the event of power failures, so.
None of this is under, none of the equipment's under any type of warranty right now either. It's all
No.
way out.
Have we looked at our insurance? Because I think at the wastewater plant, there's like an insurance rider that is some sort of maintenance, and maybe that's because of the, you know, the size of the equipment, maybe that matters, but is that, I don't remember the details, but.
It was, you're right though. There was an item that I think they mentioned it was probably $20,000 went down pumping.
We skipped it 1 year because everything was still under warranty. And then the second year, you know, we added it into our insurance quote. And
Yep.
like I said, I don't remember all the details or what it covered or if that's even available. But.
So, two separate items. I don't know if you're aware of that. So what we're talking about here tonight is like regular maintenance, like filters, oil changes, just regular things that we, electrical, things that we do just to keep the machine in good operating condition. What you're referencing is a rider through the League of Minnesota Cities insurance policy for equipment breakdown.
Oh, okay.
Yep.
I see. I see.
And we could revisit that at least when, and I'm probably wrong on these figures, but when we looked at it a few years ago, it was a relatively hefty premium, and I just could not, like, every example that I came to wasn't an insurable loss. So I was left questioning why we would get it. I think it makes a little bit more sense when you're talking on a scale of a wastewater treatment plant that has a lot of equipment, a big scale to support 3 cities. I think our quote was like $15,000 a year, and I struggled to find something that it covered.
Yeah, right. Okay. I was just curious.
Yeah, really good question. So that's kind of the rationale of we're hoping to make sure that we're more in line with preventative maintenance to make sure that our generators will
So
operate
it's-
when we want them to.
It's not a case on our side of not being able to take care of oil changes and filters. It's the electrical.
Exactly, yeah, because
Portion of it.
and that I specifically talked about with Troy, like what of the maintenance can we do ourselves and what can we not? And he's like, well, we can change the oil and filters. That's really
And we
where our
do.
expertise is, and that's what we do, but there's so much of the other electrical that we just don't handle, or we don't know how to inspect, or, you know, because that's just not what they're trained to do, that we just cross our fingers and hope that it still works. So, like I mentioned, Troy really recommended that this is something we do, and I agree. And so looking at a 3-year agreement for all 5 of those generators would be a 3-year cost of a little over $7,000, or an annual additional expense to the sewer budget of about $2,458 a year.
So we have a maintenance budget already, so are we saying this is gonna be about that? Okay.
This would be in addition to what maintenance we've already done.
Okay. So I would assume that we'll budget for it appropriately in 2020, 2021.
Have we had any major generator issues that we can remember, or?
We've had a couple, so there's currently repairs that we're sure need to happen on the school lift station. That would be part of their first contracted maintenance agreement, would be to look at that and then fix whatever the issue is out at the school.
Fix it, but then we're obviously paying for that fix.
Right.
And above.
And then we've also had issues, I know on at least 1 or 2 occasions with our portable generators not working during the
What, do we have
power
any,
outage.
are they on any type of cycle for replacement on any of that equipment?
Yeah, so they're included on our CIP. They have a really long, useful life
Yep.
compared to a lot of equipment.
Do we
just
know
'cause
where we're at? I mean, or do I have to refer to the CIP
I'd
right
have
now?
to pull up the CIP.
Okay.
I think there might be only one
Okay.
within the 10-year timeframe.
Oh, okay.
Um,
All right.
Well, and, I mean, we've been pretty lucky that we didn't have a lengthy power outage that required a generator to be in service for a lengthy amount of time at a lift station, because that is the last thing that, I mean, there's nothing you can do, and, you know, it's gotta go somewhere.
Right.
So,
Right.
or uphill, depending on how bad it is. It's been known to happen.
Do you know, did they even look at the one at the fire barn?
No, so that's actually something Nick and I
Oh,
had
good
talked
point.
about after the fact. This, we were focused on lift stations, but that's absolutely something we
Yeah.
plan to talk to the fire department about, like, that would
Yeah.
probably make sense
I
there
mean,
as well.
And maybe a little bit of a price break if you add, well, probably not. So
Mm-hmm. Each one's per,
Yeah,
they're looked at separately.
But we can add that. We wrote that down,
Mhm.
like Friday or something.
Yep.
To follow up with Katie on.
So if we have an emergency situation on one of these lift stations, would these people be one of the folks that we would contact immediately then? And
Mm-hmm. Yep. If we notice there's something wrong with the generator, they're definitely people we would
or if
contact.
it stops?
Uh-huh.
Right.
and typically, I mean, I would think our surrounding communities, our neighbors would, you know, the
Absolutely.
wastewater commission, there are, granted, you don't want to be in that situation, you know, or plan for that, you know, to need that backup, but. Okay.
All right.
Any other questions, anybody? All right, we'll entertain a motion then.
I'll make a motion.
We have a motion, is there a second?
Second.
We have a motion and a second, any further discussion from the council? All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. Item C, consider approving purchase agreement for Villas of Howard Lake. It's a hot topic tonight.
Yeah, tonight we have 3 official considerations that will ultimately put forward the Villas of Howard Lake project. The first is the purchase agreement. First, I want to thank Shannon and Mike Corey. They've been tremendous helps as we've negotiated terms, identified costs, and so forth. So what we have in front of us is a draft purchase agreement that really seeks for the developer, DDK, to cover the expenses associated with the street and utility construction, engineering, development fees that we have from the city, and putting those back so that ultimately we're not out any money, obviously, through the development.
That would be ideal.
Right, right. The city currently owns the property that you see on the screen. I don't see it on the big screen there. Do you guys have it on your?
Yeah.
No. Okay. It's
In
your
our
packet.
packet.
Sure. So this is the acreage that is immediately to the east of the Lodge of Howard Lake. We're proposing 12 single-family parcels with street and utility to serve them. I have the cost broken down to include the street and utility project that we'll be considering in a future agenda item at $518, anticipated engineering expenses at $75,000, development fees of $94,000. And mind you, those development fees, those are things like trunk access fees, sewer access fees, park dedication fees, just traditional developer expenses that we do see with new plats. We don't see many new residential plats, so I'm reminding you of just kind of what's rolled up in that consideration. We are considering a TIF district as well. The TIF district would support a great deal of the anticipated expenses that you see here. But ultimately, we are looking for $10,000 per property from DDK as part of this to go forward to ensure that we cover all of our expenses through the life of that TIF district. So what we have.
Just to back up a little bit for
Sure.
anybody who might be watching or listening, this is a purchase agreement to sell the property. We're
Yes.
not buying anything.
Yep.
Okay.
We're selling the land as stated. So basically, the purchase agreement that's in your packet indicates that the outlot would be sold to DDK. And I'm referencing that, that's the contractor itself. With the Lodge of Howard Lake, we actually partnered with Community Asset, so all of our legal agreements were with Community Asset. Some of those were assigned back to DDK because they built the lodge as well. With this one, Community Asset has mostly served as a facilitator between the city and DDK. It doesn't impact the prices, good, bad, or otherwise, but I do credit Community Asset for putting the project together.
Sure.
I don't think it would have otherwise, to be honest. So again, the purchase agreement would sell these, sell this outlot to DDK with the terms stated within. I can go into greater detail on certain costs and so forth, but ultimately what this is asking for is the approval of the purchase agreement. It would also direct the mayor and myself to move forward with closing. I don't anticipate any substantive changes, so I do note that if there's, minor clerical things that need to be updated in the purchase agreement, we would do that. But if something of substantive changes need to occur, that would be brought back to the city council. And at this point, Community Asset as well as DDK has reviewed the agreement. They're okay with the terms presented within.
And they're obviously aware of the TIF district and the stipulations and.
Yep.
It seems like a dumb question, but.
One thing that I'm still trying to tidy up with the city attorney is if we'll have a separate, like, development agreement that
Right.
addresses this. He actually does not think that'll be necessary since it's really covering street and utility expenses. But that's still something that you might see come back at a future meeting if necessary.
Right, because some of that other stuff that's typically covered in developer's agreement wouldn't be in there, like, you know, landscaping and
Yeah, and we did,
tidiness, you know, I mean, it sounds silly, but some of that stuff is the things that we tend to hear about after things start.
yeah, and that's a really valid point. I should have referenced that. A lot of the design standards that you see in the TIF agreement or development agreement, I should say, we've already addressed with the zoning regulations. A few months back, we covered a planned unit development for this acreage as well. And that dictates performance standards to what the buildings look like, the landscaping requirements, enhanced facade.
I guess I was thinking more during the actual live construction
Oh,
process,
sure.
you know? I mean, it always happens, that road is used by, you know, the lodge and people who visit there. Okay.
It's good.
Anything else, council? All right, we will entertain a motion then.
I'll make a motion.
We have a motion, is there a second?
I'll second.
We have a motion and a second. Any further discussion from the council? All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. Item D, consider resolution establishing the TIP plan 1-20 for the Villas of Howard Lake. I suppose
Yeah.
now that we agreed to sell the land, we probably should establish the TIP district.
The order is important, yes. So ultimately, this is a resolution approving the TIF district that Shannon presented on earlier. This would be for up to 12 single-family villas. He did mention at the end, we are including the parcel across the street from City Hall here as well, in the event that that develops, which would further help offset incremental revenues that we need to be made whole. Again, I think Shannon did a wonderful job covering it, but if you have any other questions, I could certainly dive in.
And as always, the TIF district isn't really tied to the developer, so if for whatever reason, if something happened, this developer went out of business, or, I mean, the TIF district is still established, and some other developer could come in and do the exact same thing.
Correct.
Within the, yeah, okay. All right. Any questions? If not, we'll entertain a motion.
I'll make the motion.
We have a motion, is there a second?
I'll second it.
We have a motion and a second. Any further discussion from the council? All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. Item E, consider approving contract for street and utility improvements for the Villas of Howard Lake.
Yes, before I forget, your last comment, Mr. Mayor, was a good one too. The purchase agreement also includes a takedown schedule of 3 units per year.
Oh.
And if the developer fails to do so, we would actually revert back to the city. So,
Interesting. Okay.
good point to make there. As far as the street and utility project, we have sought bids. Again, this is a matter that we're hoping to have approved last month, so we're a month out, but it did take that additional month or so to negotiate the final terms for the developer and the city to be comfortable to move forward with this. So what this is a bid from Northern Alliance Contracting of Bloomington, Minnesota for $517,000 to move forward with the street, utilities, sidewalks, and trail connections for this development. We've actually worked with Northern Alliance before. They were hired by the city in 2016 to do Commerce Boulevard to extend to
Oh.
Forsman Farms. We worked well together. I think they did a good job on that project. With the oversight that we have from Josh especially, I have every confidence that they could do this job well. And they are chomping to get going. So what we're looking for from the council is to award this bid to Northern Alliance Contracting.
I don't know, $10,000 over that engineer's estimate, Josh. What the heck happened? Did you just get a 1 in there? Or? Okay. Makes sense.
All right.
We'll entertain a motion then.
I'll make the motion.
We have a motion, is there a second?
I'll second.
We have a motion and a second. Any further discussion from the council? All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. Item K, there's no old business. Item L, do you have a report for us, Nicholas?
I do not.
All right. Then we'll entertain a motion to adjourn.
I'll make the motion.
We have a motion, is there a second? A motion and a second. Any further discussion from the council? All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Meeting adjourned. Well, thanks, Shannon.
Thank you, Shannon.
It's always good